Okay, we're going live now. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Kamani, licensed clinical psychologist, and we are here for what are the first steps to take when you want to leave a toxic job? You're ready to leave, okay? So we're going to be talking about that today. I have a very special guest with me, AntiHR-HR, and I'll have her introduce herself, and we'll go right into the conversation. So, Anne-Marie, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi there, everyone. This is Anne-Marie-HR, aka the Anti-HR-HR lady. If you follow me on social media, I am an HR consultant who has worked in multiple management and oversight positions of HR for over 20 plus years. I'm also a licensed attorney. And so I have a practice where I provide employee focused HR consulting and advice, and specifically advise employees about how to navigate discriminatory, hostile, and toxic workplaces.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome, Anne-Marie. And I just want to tell the audience, please stay tuned as Anne-Marie and I are going to talk about what we're offering in terms of those first steps and supporting you in those first steps. So, Anne-Marie, I know that people, particularly Black women, have reached out and, in terms of your post and talking about the impact that a hostile or toxic work environment can have on us physically, psychologically, spiritually. So I want to talk a little bit more in terms of like, what is when we talk about discrimination, we talk about toxicity, sometimes we use the terms interchangeably.
Mhm.
So can you just describe the difference between a discriminatory work environment and a toxic hostile work environment?
Sure. So I generally would describe a hostile, and I'll talk about a hostile toxic work environment, as a work environment where employees feel on an ongoing basis that they are being targeted, they are being harassed by their supervisors or managers, they are being bullied, they're being undermined. There's usually some gaslighting, micro or what I call macro aggressions taking place in the workplace on an ongoing basis, where you feel constantly on edge, high sense of anxiety, where you're constantly being attacked by your manager, your peers, for issues that are usually not really tied to your work, even though they try to make it about your work. And so those are some of the examples of being in a hostile, toxic work environment. Now, in terms of determining whether in fact that work environment is discriminatory, or what we might also call unlawful, you have to look at whether or not you feel or can prove, not even just not your feelings, but can prove and notice that the treatment that I've described is based on what we would call a protected class, based on you being a woman, based on you being a person of color, based on race, ethnicity, based on you being on your religion. For example, if you're Muslim and you come to work dressed differently than what other employees do, and you feel that you're being targeted for that, based on a disability, whether it's a visible disability or an invisible disability, like a neurodivergent disability that you disclose at work, or based on your sexual orientation, right? So if you feel that, for example, you are experiencing these things while you notice that other peers that look differently from you are not, then you may in fact not just be in a hostile, toxic work environment, you may be in a discriminatory, hostile, toxic work environment.
Okay. So, Anne-Marie, can you share with us what are the differences in terms of the first steps to take if you're in a hostile, toxic work environment as opposed to if you're in a discriminatory work environment?
Well, the things that you should do, in my view, are almost identical. What I usually tell people to look to is, first of all, know what the policies of your organization are. Does your organization have an anti-harassment policy? Do they have an anti-bullying policy, right? Do they have other do they have an EEOC statement? Do they have an affirmative action statement? Have a copy of your employee handbook, know what it is. And if you feel like you're noticing behavior that's problematic, you need to be documenting. One of the things that I advise people to do all the time, and you may think it's a simple thing, but good documentation is the foundation of escaping a hostile, toxic work environment, in a discriminatory, hostile, toxic work environment. So documenting your workplace. And one of the things I tell people is document from the first day. Not when things start going bad, but from the first day, you should have a journal. I have a journal on my website that I make available that people can purchase. Or if you want to just go on Amazon and buy a journal, do that, right? I have prompts in my journal that kind of walk people through examples of different things. But the most
Mm,
important thing is documenting your workplace, making
mhm,
sure that you're documenting meetings with your manager. If you have
mm,
one-to-one meetings, you should be documenting those. If you have an
mhm,
email from your manager that you think is odd, you need to be keeping a copy of that or screenshotting it or whatever. If there's somebody
mhm,
says something crazy on Teams or types something crazy on Teams, you should be screenshotting those things. And
mm,
documenting on a regular and ongoing basis really is important because it allows you to see when things went wrong. For example, if you've been
mm,
working somewhere and the first 3 to 6 months, which is what I always call the honeymoon period for Black women, everything
mhm,
was fine. And then all of a sudden in month 8, you start getting targeted. If you had been
mm.
documenting from the very beginning, it's easy to show when the shift began and
Yeah,
demonstrate that something is wrong and why you believe that it is wrong, right?
right.
So another example is when you're in a workplace with a person who is a bully, it
Mhm,
may not always come around to you in the beginning. Bullies like
mm,
to pick on the person they see as the weakest first, right?
mm,
So if you notice that someone else is being treated poorly, you should be documenting that, right?
mm,
Don't wait till it comes around to you,
mhm,
right? You should be
mhm.
documenting so that you can also show this is an ongoing pattern of behavior that this person is demonstrating. And if they're violating a workplace policy because you have read your policy handbook, which many of us
Mhm.
do not do, you will
Right.
know this violates our policy, so that you are positioning yourself to create a narrative of your own. Because when you get to HR, they're going to create their own narrative, and we'll get to that in a minute. So it's
Yeah.
important for you to be effectively documenting what is going on in your workplace from the first day.
Yes. Now, Emery, I see a question came in the chat. What if your supervisor doesn't meet with you? What would you advise if that happens?
If your supervisor doesn't meet with you, I would really recommend that you make the initiative to meet with your supervisor, because
Mm-hmm.
you really want to be able to get feedback
Mm-hmm.
from your supervisor about your performance. So
Mm-hmm.
if your supervisor is not initiating meetings with you, you should be initiating meetings with your supervisor. It's very important. And I'm saying this as a person who has managed HR and given people career development, professional development advice. You have to
Mm-hmm.
put yourself in the driver's seat of your career. Do not
Mm-hmm.
wait for someone else to do it. Because you
Mm.
know when they will want to have a meeting with you? When they want to put you on a PIP, when
Let's
they
talk
want to
about
start
that too.
targeting you.
Yeah.
They will
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the manager that never wanted to have a meeting with you will all of a sudden want to have a meeting. So from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of your employment, if your manager is not meeting with you,
Mm-hmm.
that's a red flag. Your manager should be
Mm.
having a meeting with you. It may not be
Yeah.
weekly, but your manager should be having a meeting with you. And then if they're not, you need to be initiating meetings to be like, how am I doing? How are
Yeah.
things going? Am I
Yeah.
meeting expectations? Don't leave
Yeah.
that to somebody else.
Yeah. And also documenting those efforts that you tried to meet with the
Exactly.
supervisor, right?
You
Right.
have to
And can you,
document all of those things.
yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the PIP, the what is it, the performance improvement plan? The progress
Well,
improvement plan?
before we talk about the performance improvement, I want to talk a little bit more about the HR and understanding your interaction with HR, because that's where all of these things come in. So you're in a
Mhm,
hostile work environment, you notice that the behavior of your manager is problematic, and you also
mhm,
may feel it's discriminatory, but you
mhm,
definitely feel it's violating the policies of your organization, and you can't go to your manager if your manager is the perpetrator of the concern. So you may decide
right,
to go to HR. What
mhm,
I always tell people is HR is not there to protect you.
mm,
I'm going to say that again. HR does not exist to protect employees. HR exists to protect the institution. And
mhm,
management is the institution. Managers are
mm,
agents of the organization. And so you need
mhm.
to understand that when you go to HR, you are literally singling yourself out to be targeted more,
Wow.
more often than not. So if you're going to go to HR, and that's not me saying not to go, it's me
Mhm,
saying that you have to understand how HR is likely to respond, especially if you're raising concern about your manager, right?
mhm,
So that you need to have a plan for what you are going to do, what you are going to ask HR to do. And it has to be an effective plan, which is what I work with my clients on doing. Because if you just go into HR and say, my manager is discriminating against me, I believe my manager is discriminating against me because these certain things happened, what
mhm,
is going to happen more than likely than not is HR is going to tell you, oh, we'll look into it. And
mhm,
then in a couple of weeks, you may find yourself in a meeting where your manager is putting you on a PIP. right?
Oh,
Okay. All of a sudden, your performance is a problem and you're on a PIP. And then the next thing you know, they want to terminate you because you failed to meet the standards of the PIP.
right. So,
So,
which is so crazy because you went in there to try to get support, but now you're the one, like, basically on
because they're going to
trial.
circle the wagons and they're not going to circle them around you.
Oh,
They're going to circle them around the manager because, again, the manager is the agent of the institution. That means what the manager does, the institution is responsible for, right? And
mm,
so if the institution can find a way to say, really, it's not the manager, it's the employee, that's the door that many times, unfortunately, HR chooses to walk through, especially when
wow.
employees raise issues of race and ethnic discrimination, anything but
Mm-hmm,
sexual harassment nowadays, for whatever
mm-hmm,
reason.
mm-hmm,
This
mm-hmm,
is the tactic, and even sexual harassment sometimes, but this is the
mm-hmm.
tactic, unfortunately, that a lot of HR departments choose. It's not the right
Wow.
tactic, but sadly, it is the tactic that a lot of them choose, is instead they
Yeah.
immediately start thinking, what can we do to sideline this employee? What can we do to control this issue? What can we do to get rid of this problem? And you're
Damage
the
control.
problem that they
Yes.
decide they want to solve, not the problem you're bringing to their attention, but
Right.
you. So when you're going to HR, you have to go in understanding how they're likely to respond and then being prepared, right?
Mm.
To deal with whatever's going to come, and presenting your issue in a way that you can circumvent or avoid some of those things. And so that's what I work with people to do, because most people do not know and wouldn't know any of
Yeah,
this. They're not going to
absolutely.
know, because
Yeah.
over all of the time that we've worked in workplaces, we have been told HR
Mhm.
is there to help you. HR is there to
Mhm.
support you. HR, go to HR if you have a problem,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But what you have to understand is HR does not, it was not created or designed to protect you.
Mm.
It's created and designed to protect the organization. And now
Yes.
if HR sees the issues that you raise as one that they need to resolve in the appropriate way in order to protect the organization, they will.
Mhm.
But you have
Hmm.
to make them see that. It's not
Wow.
something that they come to generally on their own. Generally, what
Yeah.
they will do is immediately see the employee as the problem, and they'll treat you as the problem.
Wow. It's fascinating. Somebody in the chat said something exactly what I was thinking. This is such helpful information. I wish I would have learned this before I entered the workplace. I wish I did too. And you did a post about this. And I said, I wish I knew about you when I went into HR because, yeah, you're taught HR is there to help you, to support you. And I go in there, and I think I told you, Anne Marie, I go in there with the intention of meeting with one person. And the person
Get
says, oh, well,
ambushed.
I've invited two more
Mhm.
people
You get
to the
ambushed.
meeting. Yes,
Mhm.
they ambushed me.
And
And I
then
was like,
they start doing what I call cross-examination as an attorney,
yes,
and
yes,
just throwing all these questions at you, and you're as an employee completely and wholly unprepared to
yes.
answer them, right? And so one of the things I tell people is, I'm not saying not to go to HR, but I'm saying
Mhm.
don't go to HR without a strategy, right?
Mm.
And if you need
Mhm.
someone to help you to create a strategy because you don't know how to do it, then that's what I do, because I know these things because I worked in HR for 20 something years. And
Right, right,
and yet I have had to leave many employers despite everything I know, right? I
right,
was just prepared to deal with what happened when other
right.
people are not. And so
Mm.
how would you ever know this? You're not
True,
supposed to know. You're not
true.
supposed to know. And so employees go into these situations thinking that they're going to be helped, and they give all this information to HR, and then HR turns around and uses it against them. And then you
Wow.
find you're on a PIP. All of a sudden you're a poor performer and you're not doing this and that. And I will let you in on a little secret. It is highly unusual for any employee to be put on a PIP without the okay of HR. So if you're being put on a
Mm.
PIP, HR knows about it.
Can you talk a little bit more about the PIP? What is it? What are some concerns? What should an
So
employer be concerned about with
a
that?
PIP stands for Performance Improvement Plan. And the claim
Mhm.
that HR will often tell you and your managers that, oh, we're doing this to help you improve your performance. And if you
Mhm.
can succeed, then we'll take you off. But what I want you to understand that in most cases, the PIP is
Mhm.
the last step before termination. When someone
Ooh,
comes to me and tells me they just put me on a PIP, I usually tell them, if you're going to engage me, you need to do it like now,
wow.
because in 3 weeks, you may not even have a job. And
Oh my
here's the
gosh.
thing, The reason why they like to use the PIP, especially when people raise issues and they're in a protected class, is because it allows them to make the claim that, oh, this termination isn't about race. There's no discrimination here. This is just a performance issue. We're letting this person
Mm,
go due to performance. They're trying to paper
mm,
it over and cover themselves, right?
mm-hmm,
But if you
mm-hmm.
never had any performance issue, and this is where documentation becomes important, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden after you go to HR, you have a
Mm-hmm.
performance issue, that's another red flag,
True.
right? So, but
True.
people don't know even how to confront that in most cases if they don't have any help, right?
Yeah.
So people will
Yeah.
say to me, I hear it all the time. I wish I had known you, or I wish I had spoken to somebody because I went to HR with this problem. And then 3 weeks later, they put me on a PIP. And then 3 weeks after that, they let me go. And a lot
Mm.
of times may even let you go with little or nothing because they're claiming it's performance based. So it's for cause, right? So
Wow.
all of that is for them to protect themselves from exposure. But they're already exposed if they do what I said. But the employee doesn't know how to hold them
Yeah.
accountable for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I see another comment. I went to HR after my manager put me on a PIP. Funny thing is that HR told me there's no such thing as a PIP. PIP. That's interesting.
Well, then how
Uh,
could the manager put you on one? And this is
right.
what some of the like circular things that I talk about where
Mm-hmm.
HR pretends they don't know things. They send the people,
Ah,
is this circular thing that they send the person on. And that's why it becomes important for you to know what's in your handbook, right? What does your
yes.
handbook say about performance? What does it
Yeah.
say about discipline? Because if there's
Mm-hmm.
no PIP, then the manager can't put you on one and you should be asking HR to do something about it. But just going to
Right.
HR and saying, my manager put me on a PIP, and HR says, well, there's no such thing. And then what did you do? You don't know what to do
Mm,
because you're
mm,
confused. You're like, well, this person's over here saying this person over
right.
here saying that, and HR is doing nothing to intervene or clear up the confusion because
They put it back on the employee.
it serves them for you to be confused.
Right.
And you'll be
So you go
confused
down these
right up
rabbit
until
holes.
they come back and tell you they're terminating you for poor performance. So it's like
Wow.
you have to be very careful when you get put on a PIP, that is something that you should be very concerned about as an employee,
Mm,
especially if you know that up until then you had stellar reviews. Now, I'm an HR person and I've been a manager of people. Some
mhm,
people need to be on PIPs.
mhm,
Some people
mhm,
do have performance issues. But if you've
mhm,
been a high performing employee and you've never had any of your performance called into question, and then
mhm,
you go raise a concern about
mhm,
hostile, toxic, or discriminatory behavior in your workplace, or all of those, and then all of a
mhm.
sudden you have a performance problem, that's an issue.
Emery, this sounds like silencing. Like it's like, retaliation for reporting anything. So
It is.
basically teaching employees that you have to be silent
That's
to
exactly what
anything.
it is. But there are several contexts in which retaliation is also illegal and actionable. But again,
Mm,
employees do not know. So HR departments function off of the understanding that the average employee does not know their workplace rights and does not
mm,
know to assert them. And so
mm.
what I do is to educate people so that they know their workplace rights and they feel empowered to assert them.
Yes, yes. So, Emery, can you share a little bit more in terms of for your consultation calls? What types of things do you support employees with?
So I do full service HR consulting, but I do it with an employee focus. And I did this because most HR consultants, they're out here, they're trying to work with the corporations. They want to work for the employers. They're doing DEI, they're doing lots of other things. What they're doing is nothing to benefit employees. And so what
Mm,
I decided was I wanted to create a consulting firm that specifically supports employees. I do not take employers as clients ever.
mm,
So I only work for employees. So I
mm-hmm,
do things from helping people respond to poor performance review, helping people create a professional development plan, helping a person negotiate a separation agreement if their employer is trying to lay them off, whether it's for cause or a part of downsizing or whatever. I
mm,
do everything that I do. And the biggest niche of my practice is working with employees who are dealing with discrimination at work and they need
mm,
help confronting it. They may need help documenting it. They want to leave, but they don't know how that they can do that. I work with
mm-hmm,
people to help them walk them through first, determining whether in fact there may be unlawful behavior happening at their workplace, helping them
mm-hmm,
to document it if they have not done it, If they haven't even started, I will help them start that process. And then
Mm-hmm.
I will help them raise the issues with HR effectively, which is like the second most important thing after documentation. And then if they want to leave, I also
Mm-hmm.
help people negotiate getting out of the workplace on their terms.
Hmm.
So I
To
have
leave
helped
with your coins,
employees.
like you talked about.
I have helped people this year. I've had a record last 2022, helping people, from 5 figures to high 6 figures,
Wow.
exiting employment. Because again, people don't know their rights. There's the assumption they don't. But when you
Mm-hmm.
do know and you know how to talk to HR, you will be surprised how quickly they will want to get everything out the door, right?
Isn't that
Because
something?
they don't want exposure. They don't want to deal with
Mm.
being sued. They don't want to
Mm-hmm.
deal with all of those things. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times employees think that the only way that they can get out of these places is if they hire a lawyer. And this is nothing against lawyers. I am a lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody wants to file a lawsuit. Sometimes people just
Mm.
want to figure out how quickly they can get out. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know, because I've worked in HR, that when employers are confronted with their wrongdoing, they are very hasty to settle these things. But they're
Mm.
only going to do it the way that they should do it if you make them. So a lot of times they may even come and offer you, when you confront them, they'll offer you a little bit of money to make you go away.
Mm-hmm.
And my
Mm.
thing is, depending on what they did wrong, they need to offer you more than a little bit of money.
Mm.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I work with people to identify what the issues are, to effectively document them, to effectively communicate them with their HR department, and then to
Mm-hmm.
effectively demand whatever it is that they want. Some people, I've worked with people who just wanted to be moved away from the manager they were working with, or they want a promotion. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, they want to leave. They don't want to stay in the work environment. And so I help
Mm-hmm.
people, if that's what their objective is, I help them do that.
Yeah. So, Anne Marie, can you speak to, in terms of the clients that come to you, what is their, I guess, psychological state as they're coming towards, coming forward, right?
You
In terms
know,
of the impact it's had on them.
it really varies, but I will say that over and over, I have people come to me who are so broken, for lack
Mm-hmm.
of a better word, by the situations that they're in, that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what I do is to help people to build them back up, to make them realize that that they can take control of the situation that they're in. Because
Mm.
when you're in a situation where you know that someone is doing something to you that is wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody around you is either telling you that what's happening to you is not real, or that
Mm-hmm.
you're the problem, that
Mm-hmm.
over time, that can really be harmful. And I speak from
True.
experience because I've experienced this stuff myself. And
Mm.
people have their hair falling out. I remember having anxiety attacks that were so bad that I would end up in the ER thinking I was having a heart attack. I remember being
Mm.
in an ambulance with my son when he was 7, 8 years
Oh
old,
gosh.
thinking that I was having a heart attack, and I couldn't leave him at home because there was nobody
Oh
there.
my God.
And it was an
Yes.
anxiety attack caused by stress from my job. My hair
Wow.
was falling out in patches.
Mm.
I was like
Mm.
itching and scratching at the back of my head to the point where I had a scar. I have scars on the back of my head from it, all from
Wow.
stress at work. So it's not just mental, they're physical manifestations of these things,
Yeah.
and they cause
Yeah.
people real harm. And
Yeah.
harm is
Yeah.
also something that you can hold someone responsible for. So you don't
Mm.
want to dismiss all of these things that happen and document them, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
never had a stress attack and all of a sudden you at this job and you getting heart palpitations and chest pains, you need to go to
Right.
the doctor and you need to tell them about your job,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because it was my doctor that helped me realize that it was real. My eyes would jump, started twitching
Mm.
uncontrollably, and it would usually happen when I was at rest, when I was at home, but my body was still
Yeah.
reacting
On
to
high
stress.
alert.
I couldn't get it to stop happening. So there are a lot of things. I've had people come to me and talk to me about wanting to hurt themselves and harm
Yeah, I
themselves
remember
because
that.
they felt
Yeah.
so trapped, and people feel that they're trapped. And one of the things I need people to understand is you are never trapped.
Right.
Jobs are like buses. It's kind of like what I say about men sometimes. There's always another one coming. You do
Uh-huh.
not need to ever feel that you have to stay in an environment that is harming you. And if you feel like you want to harm yourself, I don't even want you to come talk to me. I just want you to get out of that job,
Yeah.
because
And get
no
help.
job is worth that, right?
No
There's
job.
no
Yeah.
job that you should allow to make you feel that way. It's just a job.
Mhm.
It's a source of income. You should never allow your job to define who you believe yourself to be. And a lot of
Yes.
us, as Black women especially, we live in a society where we're second class citizens. Some people may not like to
Mhm.
hear me say that, but I believe it to be true as Black
Mhm.
people. And
Mhm.
we have been taught that we have to be the best. We have to do everything
Mhm.
perfectly just
Mhm.
to get a little bit of what other people get, being completely mediocre, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that brings stress in and of itself, right?
Mhm.
And then on
Mhm.
top of that, you come in and you're doing everything that they ask you to do and more, and yet they
Mhm.
still find a reason to have a problem with you. Because I often say, as Black women, we don't get punished because we didn't do our jobs. We get punished because we did it too well. And so
Yes,
you're in a
that part.
situation where you can't win in some of
Yeah.
these environments because
Yeah.
what they don't like about you is something that's intrinsic that you can't do anything about. And a
Mm.
lot of people don't like you because you are better at what you do than they are, right?
Mm.
And so
So trying to
you're
take you down.
getting targeted. You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. Then you go to
Yeah.
HR and they treat you like you're making it all up.
Mm.
This stuff is very, very harmful to people.
It is. It is. It is. Now, Anne Marie, someone asked, what are some important elements to document?
Like I said, I believe that the things that you should document is you should be documenting every meeting you have with your manager. As
Mhm.
Kamani mentioned, if you're not having meetings with your manager, you should be asking to have meetings and documenting if they refuse to meet with you, because that's
Mhm.
weird, right?
Yeah.
When you're in meetings, team meetings, I used to take notes at team meetings, right? Because if somebody said something crazy, I would write it down, right? You should document all of those things. Don't just, even if things are fine, you can
Mhm.
just write this meeting, you had this meeting on this date. This is generally what you talked about, and this is who was there. If nothing
Mhm.
happened, that's a good day. But
Mhm.
what's good about that is if next week something happened, then you can see everything was fine up until this date, and then this person started trying to
Mhm.
embarrass this person in the meeting, or calling this person out in
Mm.
the meeting, or calling this person
Mhm.
out, or raising issues
Mhm.
about, or I had all these meetings with my manager and they never mentioned my performance. And then after I went to HR, they wanted to put me on a PIP. Because you have
Mm.
documentation, it helps you to establish patterns,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
that's why it's so important. So I really think from the first day, you don't have to write an epistle. Just
Mhm.
summarize at the end of the day, what kind of day did you have? What happened? Did you have a meeting
Mm.
with your manager that day? What did your manager
Mhm.
say about your performance? They said it was great. That's good. Write that down. And you should ask these questions. When you go into meetings with your manager, you need to ask them, how am I doing?
Mm.
Did I do this the way that you wanted? Is there something that you would have liked me to do differently? Ask it so you can write down when they said you were great.
Mm. Mhm.
Or if later they want to say that you're not great, well, they got all these 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 meetings where you said I was great because I asked
Right.
you. So
Right.
how
So what
am
was
I
the
not great
problem?
now?
Right. 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 Then all of a sudden I go
So
to HR and I'm not great.
if you're not documenting, it becomes hard to prove these things effectively.
Ah, and I love what you said to Anne Marie, that even if it's not happening to you in that moment, but you are witnessing something,
Write it down.
document that too.
Write
Yes,
it
yes,
down.
yes, yes. And you also mentioned, Anne Marie, that you have a workbook in terms of documenting. And you said there are certain things. Can you tell the audience in terms of what's in the
Yes.
workbook?
So
Yeah,
I
and how to
created
access that.
what I call a documentation journal. It's a downloadable journal. And what it has is it has a calendar, and it also has pages for you to just write down each day. And I also give
Mm,
descriptions about like what a hostile work environment is, and different definitions of things to help prompt people, and questions I'll
mm,
ask in the journal, like what was your day like? What
mhm,
was there anything that happened today that made you feel uncomfortable, or so on? So that people, to trigger people writing, right? But because I really realize that people do not understand how valuable documentation is. Even if you go to
right.
an attorney, one of the first things they're going to be asking you about is what kind of records you have, what kind of proof do you have,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
so one of the things I do with my clients is I make sure that they have all those things in a row. So if we do have to refer them to an attorney, and
mhm,
sometimes we do, they
mhm.
have all their stuff together when they go to an attorney.
Yes,
They have all their
yes.
documentation and timelines and so on together, because that is
Mhm,
very, very important. And so if
mhm.
you are doing it from the beginning, it becomes
Mhm.
very easy to pinpoint when the problematic behavior and identify it for what
Mm,
it is,
mhm,
right?
and
Because
what mhm,
one of the things that we are often really afraid of doing is confronting things as women, especially
Mm.
Black women, because we're afraid that we're going to be called that we're angry. We're afraid that we're going
Yes.
to be whatever. I
Yes.
always tell people we need to be angry. I believe my anger is righteous and I have a right to it. And
Absolutely.
I make no
Absolutely.
apologies for it. I never have.
Mhm.
Right? If
Mhm.
you're not acting
Mhm.
right, I have a right to be angry about that and I
Yep.
shouldn't apologize for it. And
Yep. Yep.
so we have to not adopt this idea that we need to be the mules and we need to be the allow people to victimize us. And when people
Mhm.
are behaving problematic, you have a right to confront that. You don't have to
Mhm.
be loud and crazy and whatever, but you can still confront problematic
Yes.
behavior. And you should. You
Yes.
have to. You have to.
Yes. And I think when we don't, then that contributes to a lot of the psychological and the physical
It
issues, right?
does,
The high
because
blood
you're
pressure, all those
internalizing,
things.
you're holding
Yes.
it all in,
Yes.
and you're taking it home with you. And another thing I tell people is why I say you can't let your work define you is because then
Mhm.
when things aren't going the way, it infects the way you deal with yourself, the way you deal with your family, the way you deal with your children. You got to
Absolutely.
leave the work at work. You have to
Yes.
create boundaries between work and the rest of your life. And a lot of us
Yes.
are working 24 hours a day for these jobs that are only paying us for 40 hours a week. Stop
Right.
it. Stop
Yes.
it.
Yes. They don't
Have
own you.
boundaries and you have to set them because if you don't have any, they're going to treat you like you don't have any.
True.
So you need to leave these things at work and go home
Mhm.
and pick it up when you got to go back in there at 9 o'clock the next day. But you got to
Yes.
intentionally leave some of these things at work. And a lot of us are always on the phone and we always checking the email and we're doing all these things. They are paying you for 40 hours a week.
Right. They don't
That's what they're
own
paying you
you,
for.
right? Just
They
like
don't
that
own
slave
you.
mentality, right? They don't
And
own
it's
us anymore.
perpetuated. We are taught that that's what we're supposed to do, and we have to
Yeah.
choose not to do it.
Exactly, exactly. And you said two things that reminded me of the post by Dr. Nadia Lopez. The one was, let's stop killing ourselves at these jobs that would not grieve for us at our graves, right?
Well,
So why are we killing
you
ourselves?
know what I say, not one day in your honor. That was one of the most powerful things my sister said to me when I was like a workaholic. And she said to me, not one day in your honor. And what she said is, they will not close one day in your honor if you drop dead. Not one day in
Wow.
your honor. She said they won't close one day. And she was absolutely correct. She was
True.
absolutely correct. And what I add on to that now is you might get a moment of silence in the conference room, but you might not even get that.
Oh,
So don't be up
expendable.
here killing yourselves for people who won't even have a moment of silence for you.
True. Oh, man, right. And then the part you also talked about how your son was in the ambulance with you, right?
Mhm.
So your son witnessing the stressful job and the impact on you.
Yeah,
Dr. Nadia Lopez also talked about how the stressful job can impact your family, right? So impact
yes,
her mother, her
yes.
daughter. And so I just want Black women to recognize that when you are in a toxic, hostile work environment, it affects not only you, but the people who love you,
It
right?
affects
So
everyone.
it
Yeah.
does. It
And your kids
does.
know this. I was a single mother, and I remember my son when he was 9 or 10. We were at dinner on a Sunday, and
Mhm.
I was checking my emails, and he sighed and he said, "You work all the time." And it stopped me
Ooh.
in my tracks. And it was one of the things that caused me to require my job to give me a separate phone. I refused to let them
Mm.
send me messages on my phone after that.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
on Friday evenings, I would turn the work phone off and leave it
Good.
alone, right? But it
Boundaries.
was because of what he said and the way he said it,
Yeah.
and he was only 9 or 10 years old, right? And
Wow.
so I think we have to recognize that it not just affects us, it affects everybody around us that cares
Yes.
anything about us.
Yes. And Anne Marie, you said something in terms of, and I think it's important, particularly for Black women, to know that you and I have been in similar situations, right? And we're on the other side in terms of now helping other Black women trying to get out. What was that deciding moment for you, Anne Marie, at that toxic job that no more? Like you
Well,
just, mm-mm.
it was by this time, it was the third or fourth time I had been in a situation like this. And I just was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I literally
Mm.
was like, I cannot go to another plantation. That's literally what I said. I cannot
Wow.
go to another plantation. And I think it was, my mother had died. My nephew died
Mm.
6 weeks later. And I
Mm.
was really in the a stock taking period of my life about
Mhm.
what do I want for myself.
Mhm.
And I knew I wanted to get out of this job, but it was a question of what do I want to do after I leave this job?
Mm,
I mean,
mhm.
the one thing I do know is how to get out of a job and get my coin on the way out. So I wasn't concerned about that part. It was more
Yes.
like, what do I want to do? And
Mm.
I was very, very good at what I did. I was already being headhunted a lot. And I just was like,
Mhm.
I'm not going on another plantation. And I mean, I remember
Wow.
saying that out loud. And I was working with a coach, and I credit her a lot with this, a Black woman who's my coach. And I remember saying to her, you know, I would really like to move abroad. I don't want to live in the United
Mm.
States. I want to leave. And I remember her looking at me and she put her pen down and she said, well, why can't you?
Hmm.
And I couldn't give her an answer. And so I was like, you know what? I actually can leave and go live somewhere else. I don't have to. And I could go work for myself, you know, because we're
Yes.
very afraid. We want that, you know, that good job and the car and the this and the that. But none of those things are going to change the fact that you're being discriminated against at
Well,
work.
it's not good if it's killing you, right?
It's not.
So what's good about
It's
it?
not gonna make you happy. It's not gonna
Yeah.
change anything.
Yeah.
So I think that I was just at a period in my life where I wanted something different, and I decided that I was going to go for it. That I did
Mm.
not want to just go to another job, no matter how much it
Yeah.
was gonna pay me, because I know it's a cycle that we go through.
Yeah.
We're
True.
the best thing ever for about 3 to 6 months until we make somebody feel inferior or somebody feel
Yes.
whatever because they don't know what they're doing or they're talking about, and then we're public enemy number 1. And
Yes.
I just didn't feel like dealing with that again. So I just
Yes.
decided the last time that when I exited, I was not going back onto another plantation.
Wow. Wow. You were totally liberated, right? Like, I'm done
100%.
with this. Yeah. And that whole thing that people talk about from pet to threat. And you realize no. And you know what else, Anne Marie, what's so beautiful is when we think about working with other Black women, you know, that we have this degree, a lot of times this degree of trust that another Black woman can talk to you
Mhm.
or kind of confront you in a certain way because we have similar types of experiences. Not that we're
We
all
have
the
the same
same.
lived experience. So when I was
Right.
talking to my coach about what was happening to me at work, she
Mm-hmm.
was finishing my sentences. She knew, while she knew that I wasn't
Yes.
making it up and that I wasn't, you know, just playing a victim or whatever. She knew that what I was experiencing was discrimination, right?
Yes.
While
Yes.
someone else would have tried to like interrogate and try to talk me out of what I knew was happening, she never did
Mm-hmm.
that. And I do the same thing with my clients. I never question when someone comes to me and tells me, and what they tell me never surprises me. A lot of
Yeah.
times I can explain to them what happened next before they can tell me what happened next.
Isn't that
Because
something? Yeah.
I know what
Yeah.
happened next. I know what the tactics are. And it happens
Yes.
over and over and over again. And it's a
Yes.
real mind, I mean, it really messes with your mind.
It sure does.
Because for us, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and how many times.
Yes, yes, yes. So the mind part, right? That's the part that I focus on, right? So you help people in terms of really looking at what are your options, what to do with HR, how to leave with your coins, right? Giving them very practical skills of what to do. And I really hope Black women that you are paying attention to what she's saying in terms of documentation and that you seek her out for consultation if you're in this situation. My focus is more so in terms of the healing part of it, right? So
Mhm.
when you are in a toxic job, I know it takes a profound, it is devastating,
It
right?
is.
And so it's important to be able to heal from that because you don't want to take that garbage, that trauma and drama with you to wherever you go. So if you have your own business or if you got another job, you need to heal. Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Anne-Marie Archer's information in the description section so that you can contact her for consultation. And I'll also put my information in the description section for the coaching program that I have, which is for 5 sessions for Black women who are healing from toxic jobs.
And
Okay.
I
So
will
there's
say
resources
that
available.
I really, really recommend, and I often recommend it to my clients, is to get professional help. I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
coach. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help you heal from what happened to you. I can help you get some money so that you have choices. Money
Yes.
does not bring happiness, but it does give you options.
Yes, it does.
And
Yes, it
so
does.
it can help pay for your therapist, among other things. But I can't help you with that, but I often tell people, I really recommend you talk to a therapist. I recommend you get
Yeah.
a career coach. I recommend you
Yeah.
get a life coach because it's it's a damage that doesn't ever leave. I think you learn to put it in perspective. That's what I've learned
Mm-hmm.
to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you have to confront it though. You can't just try
Yes.
to push it down and pretend it didn't happen when you move to the next place, because you're going to
Yes.
carry it with you, and you're going to be on hyper alert all the time and
Mm-hmm.
overreacting to things that you shouldn't overreact
Mm-hmm.
to, because
Mm-hmm.
the anxiety stays. And so it's
Yes.
very important to work through that with a professional. I cannot
Yes.
say how important it is to work with somebody like Kamani, when you've left the toxic work environment, because I don't care how much money or if you sued them or whatever you get, it is not going to resolve what you went through. It's not.
Yes. And Anna Marie, you made a post the other day, I reposted it about that this is a form of trauma
It
and
is.
that you are in the process of ongoing healing, as am I, right?
Mhm.
So I don't want Black women to think, okay, well, I've gone to 1 or 2 therapy sessions, I should be good. This is an ongoing healing process because it's devastating, because it really gets at our sense of self,
Yeah.
right? Because just think about as Black women, how hard we work to even get to where we get, right? Work so hard. It's very much a part of our identity in terms of what we're doing, how
You
hard we
do
work.
everything a society told you you're supposed to do. You go to
Yes.
school, you get the degree, you learn, you make sure you're the expert in whatever niche it is that you're in. You're doing
Yep.
all the things. You're there till all hours of the night when everybody else goes home. You're overachieving, and you still get punished for it.
Right.
Still get punished because of what you look like.
Right. And
Something
then
that
intimidation by your
and
greatness.
and it has an intimidation for how good you are at what you do, because how dare someone look like you be better than them?
Exactly. 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 So, Emma, I'm just going to read a few more comments and then we're going to wrap it up, right? Let's see. Okay, you have the right to be angry. When you set the boundaries, then they try to hit us with the quiet quitting.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that?
Quiet quitting.
Mm-hmm.
I think, to be blunt, I think quiet quitting is bullshit. I don't believe in the concept of quiet quitting. I think people should quit loudly. That's what I help people do. I don't believe in the quiet
Okay.
quitting. I
Okay.
mean, document quietly. That's what you should do quietly. The quitting part,
Okay.
they need to remember the check that they had to cut for you. So I don't believe in
Okay.
quiet quitting. And I just don't believe it conceptually. People have always quietly looked for a new job. People don't announce, I'm going to go look for a new job. When has that ever happened? They just
Right.
make up names and act like it's something new. It's not new.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes.
something that we have always done. Black women been doing it,
Yes.
right?
We always
So
got a
I just
side
like
thing looking for our
conceptually, I
next
think it's
option.
nonsensical. And I actually
Mm-hmm.
think that we need to be a little bit louder when we quit.
Point taken. And you know why we need to be louder is that we need to show other Black women that you can leave and that
Mhm.
you don't deserve this crap, right? That you
Yeah.
can leave and there are options for you. Okay, let's
And
see.
also, it's a question for me of accountability. There are two words I talk about a lot: boundaries and accountability. And
Hmm.
so you can't make your employer change if they don't want to change, but you can
Mm-hmm.
make them pay for their bad behavior. You can hold them accountable for their bad behavior, right? And
Yes.
to me, confronting these issues and making them in a way that makes them have to resolve it in the way you want them to resolve it is
Mm-hmm.
a form of accountability. And to
Mm.
me, that's very important, right? So
Yes.
not just going quietly and skulking away and just letting them fire you over some BS nonsense.
Yes.
You
So
know what I'm
go in there
saying?
with reinforcements and
Yes,
you help them with
and
the
proof
reinforcement.
and facts, right?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Some employers expect 40 plus hours for a person to be seen as a high performing employee. We need to reject that. That's a lie, right?
Yes, yes,
Quiet quitting is setting boundaries such as working your time that they are paying you for only what we talked about that. The quiet
yeah.
quitting. I wish I
That's
knew you
not
before.
quiet quitting. That's having some sense and having some boundaries in your life. That's not quiet quitting. It's having boundaries. It's like, what are
Yes,
you working 50, 60 hours a week for somebody that's paying you 40 hours a week?
for
I mean,
real.
when you stop and think about it, the number that capitalism has played on American people, the American worker, and particularly the Black worker, because we think we have so much to prove, right?
Yes.
That you think you need to be working 50 and 60 hours for somebody's paying you for 40? For what?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
For what? For
Mm-mm.
how?
Yeah,
No.
reject that. Reject that lie. Reject that lie. I wish I knew you before today. You're an amazing woman who has a wealth of knowledge and expertise that I need in my life. I hope you ladies repeat this conversation over and over again. Every Black woman can relate to this. I agree. Okay. So, Black women, I hope that you were able to get what we were talking about in terms of our intention of this conversation about the first steps when you are ready to leave a toxic job. The main thing we talked about was documentation. Document, right? I hope you heard what Anne Marie said in terms of you document from the beginning, right? So as soon as you start that job, you're documenting ongoing because you want to have a history of what has been happening. And when something happens, even if it doesn't happen to you, you make sure you're documenting it so that there's a pattern. We're looking at patterns of
You can show
behavior.
the pattern of behavior. It's very
Yes.
important.
Yes. And you asked also, Anne Marie, you talked about make sure you're asking your manager about how you're doing and document that. Because if you go to human resources and they come back around and say, oh, you're not doing your job, but you have all this
Pull
documentation,
the journal out, right?
pull it out.
So it's like you really, what I say to people is put yourself in the driver's seat of your career and remember
Yes.
that they're not your family, it's a job. They are
Mm,
paying you for your services. It's
mm,
not, they're not your family, they're not your friend, it's your job,
yes.
right? And
Yes.
so you need to go into a job with that mindset that they have brought
Yes.
you here to do a particular thing and you're going to do that to the best of your ability for 40 hours a week, right? And so don't, go in there and wait to see what's going to happen. You
Yeah.
need to be like, when are we meeting? And in the next blog post and video I'm going to do is going to be talking about what you need to do to avoid these situations in the first place. So you get out of one of these work environments. How do you make sure you don't end up in another one? Because
Mm-hmm.
we do not see sometimes the signs of a
Mm-hmm.
toxic and hostile workplace
Mm-hmm.
in the recruitment and the interview process. And so I'm going to talk a little
Mm,
bit about how to recognize some of these things, right?
yeah.
Because you can spot it if you know what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
Employers that don't have boundaries and don't believe
Yes.
in accountability, right?
Right.
So you want to avoid that kind of workplace. But if you are in one, you want to effectively document it. And don't forget your employee handbook. We have got to start reading our employee handbook, people. They give it to you and ask you to sign and acknowledge receipt for a reason.
Mm,
Download that sucker and have a copy at home with you that belongs to you. Do not rely on that stuff online because they cut your
mm.
access. You won't even have a copy of the handbook. Make sure that you have a copy of your employment handbook downloaded in hard copy in your house and
Point
read
taken.
it. Read it.
Mm-hmm.
Know what's in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Good advice. Good advice. So, ladies, you have a special treat because Anne Marie and I will be back again next Thursday, same time, to continue this conversation as Anne Marie was talking about in terms of now that you decide to leave, what do you need to do so you don't carry over some of that other stuff to the next opportunity? Okay. So, again, check the description section, watch this video over and over and over again if you need to, take notes. Please share with another Black woman or Black women so that we can all be empowered. We all deserve to be in environments where we are affirmed and respected. Okay. And if you have not already subscribed to my channel, please do so. Lifting Us with Climb Consulting, Wellness Services. And we will see you next week. Emery, do you have any last words that you would like to share with the audience?
I do not. It's just been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, ladies. So we will see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.